Well, obviously, we got the Final Four going on Saturday and then the national championship game on Monday. But Thursday, around middle part of the day, we got double boom news there. Roy Williams retiring after 33 years as the head coach of UNC. And then right after that, Texas officially announcing that they were hiring Chris Beard away from Texas Tech. And both of those news stories happened on April Fools. And on yesterday's show, I was like, hey, just so you know, be careful what you believe because there's so much chaos out there in these internet streets, especially around April Fools. It's almost impossible to know what is and what is not going to end up being true. And so we've got Chris Beard to Texas. And if you had to break down each of those scenarios and be like, hey, which one of these stories do you feel like is a more substantial one? I think Chris Beard to Texas. Now, Roy Williams, we know the difficulty that UNC had after legendary basketball coach Dean Smith decided to retire in terms of bringing in Bill Guthridge, who was his top assistant, and then Matt Doherty. That didn't really work out very well. And then Roy Williams kind of righted the ship, and UNC has been dominant under his stewardship basically since then. But to me, Chris Beard leaving Texas Tech and going in-state to a rival program in conference is something that, frankly, you never see happen. And so I can understand why Texas Tech fans are up in arms and feel like this is a form of betrayal because they gave him a monster contract. He had them in the national title game 2 years ago. He said all the right things about how he wanted to build a big-time program that won at an elite level and how he wanted to be there for a long time. And then Texas comes open, and I feel like this is sort of the deep-seated fear that Texas Tech fans have in general, is that at some point, if they are successful, somebody will come hire away their guy. And frankly, I don't begrudge people taking better opportunities in their careers, no matter what you do for a living. But it is, I think, fairly significant that we can't even point to anybody ever making a decision like this before. And again, the one that a lot of people would point to is Rick Pitino at Louisville, but he went to Boston in between, the Celtics, in between that gig. And also, at least Louisville was a different conference. Now, I know it's a major rival of Kentucky, and look, Benedict Pitino, and when Pitino went back into Rupp Arena, it was a crazy scene. But in the grand scheme of things, we've never seen anything like this. And I think that Chris Beard will win at a high level at Texas. And since Texas fired Rick Barnes, they brought in Shaka Smart, who they were convinced would win at a high level. And then he never won them an NCAA tournament game. And then he feels like the seat's getting warm. And so he bails and he goes up to Marquette. But, man, if you know the state of Texas and the deep-seated hate, in a good way, by the way, that schools like Baylor and A&M and Texas Tech and Houston, to some extent, have for the University of Texas, and the way that Texas kind of looms as over everyone, right, in terms of attention, in terms of their sports program, to decide to go from Texas Tech to Texas without any stop in between, there is a lot of bitterness right now all over the state of Texas if you're a Red Raider fan. And if you're a Longhorn, I think you feel like you got a definite win. And it's one of those scenarios where not only have you potentially devastated an inside of your conference foe, but in state, you've now got a guy, I think, in Chris Beard, who the standard now is the expectation, Final Four national championship. If you've already been to the Final Four, and granted Shaka Smart took VCU to the Final Four as an 11 seed, much like UCLA back in the day, but if you've already been to the Final Four and you've already been to the championship game at Texas Tech, Chris Beard, I think, has to presume that he can take Texas Longhorn basketball to the proverbial next level. Rick Barnes took Texas to the Final Four once, so he got there, but he wasn't able to sustain the same level of success in the regular season in March Madness. And by the way, to a certain extent, that same storyline has been true at the University of Tennessee for Rick Barnes. Texas fired Rick Barnes because they said, hey, you can't get us to the next level because you don't win enough when you get to the postseason in college basketball. And so they fired him. They brought in Shaka Smart. He actually had less success in the postseason than Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes went to Tennessee, got Tennessee, spent a month at number 1, has gotten Tennessee all the way up to the 2 seed, gotten them to the Sweet 16, but he hasn't been able to kick the door down at Tennessee and get back to the Elite Eight or the Final Four for the first time in program history either. So I feel like if you are a Longhorn fan, you have to be pretty ecstatic about this hire. If you're a Texas Tech fan, I think you can deservedly be incredibly upset about the way that all of this has shaken down.